She was standing on that stage, certificate in her hands, the biggest smile I had ever seen on her face. And my husband leaned over, close enough that the couple in front of us could hear every word, and said, "She only got up there because the bar was low." I felt my whole body go still. Zoe glanced out into the crowd, just for a second. Her smile didn't disappear completely, but it changed. Something went out of it, like a light dimming behind a window. I gripped the program in my lap so hard the paper crinkled. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Because Principal Anita Acaffer had just walked back to that microphone, and what she said next, nobody in that auditorium saw coming. "My name is Deja. I'm 37 years old. And this is the story of the day my daughter saved us both, without even knowing that was what she was doing. I work as a hospital records coordinator. It's not a flashy job. Nobody at a dinner party gets excited when I describe what I do. But it's steady, it pays the bills, and for the past 6 years, it has been the thing that kept our household from falling apart. I am the one who makes sure the lights stay on, the fridge stays full, and the rent goes out on time without drama. My daughter Zoe is 14. She is quiet in the way that deep water is quiet. She feels absolutely everything, but she rarely tells you about it. Instead, she writes. She draws. She fills notebooks with words and sketches that she never shows anyone unless she fully trusts them. She is the kind of kid that the loud world doesn't always know what to do with, but she is extraordinary. I knew that from the moment she was born. 6 years ago, I married Troy. He was warm when we met, patient. The kind of man who remembered small things you mentioned in passing and brought them back up weeks later to show he had been listening. I thought that kind of attention meant something real. I was wrong. The charm didn't disappear overnight. It faded slowly, the way color fades from something left too long in the sun. And the place where his warmth used to live, when it came to Zoe, filled in with something colder. Dismissiveness, impatience, criticism that always arrived wrapped in the excuse of honesty. I stayed because I believed people could grow. I stayed because leaving felt like admitting I had made a catastrophic mistake. But sitting in that auditorium, watching my daughter's smile dim from something a grown man said under his breath at her greatest moment, I felt something inside me stop trying to hold it together. I wasn't the loudest person in that room. I wasn't powerful or connected. But I had been paying attention to everything for a very long time, and that was about to matter more than Troy ever expected. If you've ever kept quiet to keep the peace, while watching someone you love get slowly chipped away, you already know how heavy that gets. Subscribe, drop your story in the comments, and click hype. Let's start here. Zoe's graduation was not a small thing. She attended a competitive magnet school, the kind that requires an application, teacher recommendations, and a GPA you have to fight to maintain every single semester. Getting in was hard. Staying in was harder. Zoe had done both, quietly, without making a big deal of it, the way she did everything. I didn't know about the award until they called her name. The Excellence in Writing Award, nominated by faculty, goes to one student per grade. This year's 8th grade recipient is Zoe. I put my hand over my mouth. She had known. She had kept it a secret on purpose, wanting to see my face when they announced it. That was so completely her. She walked to the podium in that calm, measured way of hers, the way she moved when she was feeling more than she was showing. She accepted the certificate. She nodded at the principal. She turned toward the audience with that brilliant, rare, full smile of hers. And Troy exhaled beside me loud and slow and said, "Writing award. Great. So she'll be broke and creative." The father sitting directly in front of us turned around. He didn't say anything. He just looked at Troy for a long moment, the way you look at something you can't quite believe is real. I put my hand on Troy's arm. "Stop, please," he shrugged. "I'm just being honest, someone has to be." I looked back at the stage. Zoe was walking back to her seat. And that's when Principal Acaffer stepped up to the microphone again, before the applause had even finished settling. "I'd like to take a moment," she said, and her voice had a quality to it that made the whole room pay attention immediately. This particular award was not a simple selection. The student who received it submitted a piece of writing that stopped every faculty member in this room. I'd like to read one paragraph from it, with her permission. She looked directly at Zoe. Zoe looked back at her. Then she nodded. The room went completely silent. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what the years before it looked like inside our house. Troy's dismissal of Zoe didn't start with big moments. It started with small ones, the kind you second guess yourself about because they're just small enough to be explained away. Her sketchbooks he called a waste of time. Her writing notebook, the one she carried everywhere, he once swept off the kitchen table without a word to make room for his things. She picked it up off the floor without saying anything. He never apologized. I told myself it was thoughtlessness, not cruelty. I was wrong about that too. About 3 months before graduation, we went to a family cookout at Troy's brother's house. The kids were running around in the backyard, and the adults were sitting in lawn chairs with cold drinks. And Troy said to his brother, loud enough for Zoe and 3 of her cousins to hear, "She's a good kid. Just not the type you brag about, you know." Zoe laughed. A small, quick sound, like she was in on the joke. She went inside to get a drink and didn't come back out for 20 minutes. That night, I went to her room and found her lying on her bed with her face turned toward the wall. She said she was tired. I sat on the edge of her mattress and listened to her breathe and felt something tighten in my chest that wouldn't loosen. Around the same time, Troy started making a different kind of argument. He said Zoe would do better at the neighborhood public school, less pressure, less commute, a better fit for her personality type. He framed it as concern. I almost believed him. But I started to notice that his argument got louder every time there was a school event coming up, every time he was expected to show up somewhere and sit in a room full of parents who were proud of their children. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to be reminded that he was supposed to feel something he didn't feel. I started meeting quietly with Zoe's school counselor. I started keeping a notes app on my phone, just dates and short descriptions, things Troy said, where we were, who else was there. I didn't have a plan yet. I just knew, the way you know something before you can explain it, that I needed a record. Through all of it, Zoe kept writing. Her English teacher pulled me aside at a conference and said, "Your daughter processes pain beautifully. You should be very proud." I nodded and thanked her and held myself together until I got back to my car. What Troy didn't know, what he had no idea about at all, was that Zoe had already told the truth. Not to me. Not to a friend. She had told it to a panel of teachers, in an essay she submitted months before graduation. She had written about what it felt like to be invisible inside your own home. She never named anyone. She didn't need to. The imagery was precise and it was devastating, and every teacher who read it recognized exactly what kind of house she was describing. And I had been building something of my own, quietly, in the background. We were both done. We just hadn't shown our hands yet. My cousin Renee had been through her own version of this 8 years earlier. She was the one person in my family who didn't tell me to be patient, or to try harder, or to think about what leaving would do to the household. She sat across from me at her kitchen table one afternoon and said, "Deja, what he's doing to that little girl is a pattern. It does not get better. It only gets a name." Renee was the one who connected me with a family law attorney. She drove me to the first consultation and sat in the waiting room the entire time I was inside. She didn't ask me what was said when I came out. She just handed me a coffee and said, "Okay, what's the next step?" Meanwhile, Troy had no idea anything was in motion. After the graduation ceremony, he went straight to his phone in the car. He told me the event had run too long. On the entire drive home, he did not say one word about Zoe's award. Not one word. Zoe sat in the back seat and looked out the window, and I watched her face in the rearview mirror and made myself a promise I intended to keep. The night before I filed, Troy mentioned casually that we should look into the school transfer over the summer. I said, "Sure." Just that one word. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to whatever he was watching on his phone. He genuinely believed I wouldn't move. He had been betting on my patience for 6 years, and he thought that bet was still safe. He had no idea the clock had already run out. 1 week after graduation, I asked Troy to sit down at the kitchen table. The house smelled like the coffee I had made that morning, ordinary and domestic, and completely at odds with what was about to happen. Renee was parked outside. My attorney was reachable by phone. I put a folder on the table in front of him. He looked at it, then he looked at me. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside were printed logs, dates, times, locations, what was said, who was present. 4 months of documentation. There were screenshots of texts. There were 2 voice memos I had recorded on my phone, including the one from the cookout, his own voice saying clearly and without any possible misinterpretation that Zoe was not the type you brag about. Troy laughed. It was a short, disbelieving sound. "You recorded me in my own house." "Our house," I said, "and yes." He tried to pivot immediately. He said I was overreacting. He said Zoe was too sensitive and always had been. He said I was doing this to punish him for something unrelated, that this had nothing to do with Zoe, that I was using her as an excuse. I let him finish. Then I slid the last page across the table. It was a single printed sheet. One paragraph, centered on the page. The same paragraph Principal Ackerfer had read aloud at the graduation ceremony, in front of 400 people, while Troy sat 3 rows back making jokes under his breath. I watched him read it. Your stepdaughter wrote this, I said. Her teachers read it. The entire faculty nominated her for an award because of it. 400 people heard it out loud last week. And you were sitting right there in that auditorium telling me she'd be broke and creative. Troy didn't say anything. He read the paragraph again. I watched something move across his face, not guilt exactly, not the kind of guilt that comes from genuinely understanding what you've done, but the slower, flatter realization that the ground had already shifted and there was nothing left to stand on. I stood up. I filed this morning, I said. Renee is outside, you have until tonight. He looked up at me. I picked up my phone and my keys and I walked out of that kitchen. Troy moved out within days. He didn't fight the process. The documentation made the path forward clear-cut, and he knew it. There was no dramatic scene, no final argument. He packed what was his and he left, and the house felt different the moment he was gone. Quieter in a way that felt like relief rather than absence. Zoe didn't ask me many questions about what had happened. She was smarter than that. She asked me one thing, standing in the doorway of the kitchen a few days after, still in her pajamas, her hair not yet brushed. Are we going to be okay? I looked at her. My quiet, deep, extraordinary daughter who had been writing her way through pain in notebooks for years, who had stood on a stage and been seen by 400 strangers before her own stepfather thought to pay attention. We already are, I told her. Several months later, Principal Ackerfer submitted Zoe's essay to a statewide young writers competition without telling either of us. Zoe placed second. She called me from school to tell me, her voice high and a little breathless, and I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and cried in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. I spent a long time apologizing for the way I move through the world. Quietly, carefully, without making a lot of noise. I thought it was a weakness. I thought it was why people underestimated me, why they felt safe dismissing the people I loved right in front of my face. But it wasn't a weakness. It was how I paid attention. It was how I built the thing that protected my daughter when she needed it. It was how I won without ever once raising my voice. Patience without preparation is just waiting. But patience with preparation, that's a different thing entirely. That's how you walk into a room already holding everything you need. If someone in your life has ever made your child feel small, and you stayed quiet longer than you should have, this story is for you. Subscribe and tell me in the comments, what was the moment you finally said enough? You don't have to carry that alone. Every hype you give this video puts it in front of a parent who needs permission to act. Click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Standing up for yourself is one of the hardest things there is. If you've been there, subscribe and become part of this community. Let me know this story helped by clicking hype. And tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel.